Hello and welcome back to TWIT. For those that don't know, TWIT stands for This Week I Tried, and the premise is simple. I play a game, write a script about the game, then make a video at some point giving my opinions alongside a general overview of the game. And this week I tried TemTem, the early access PC and not Nintendo Pokemon game, something I'm sure Nintendo hate me calling this game. And to be fair, I only call it a Pokemon game because I actually don't know what you call this genre. Regarding my current playtime and progress with this game, which for some reason I feel like pointing out more than I have ever done before, I am as far as the first dojo after dealing with the villains for the first time, at about 6 hours of gameplay with a leveled up 6 TemTem team at level 20 on average. Also, and this is very unlike me, I did not get this game through Humble Bundle or any discount. I bought it at full price. Mainly because streamers I like were playing it and it just seemed like a good game. It's currently £30, which is £10 cheaper than what Pokemon Sword and Shield is, although it's about as 10th as developed as most Pokemon games. And once again, for some reason I feel like telling you this even though I don't normally, I do not play this game that often, although that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad game. Although with Pokemon I played every game to completion, normally in an incredibly long binge. This game was made by Creamer, and this has taken me 5 takes to do it without laughing. And it was published by Humble Games, the company behind Humble Bundle. Creamer has made one other game, Immortal Redneck, which was an FPS roguelike game and is about as relatable to TemTem as Barbie is to Doomguy. The premise, which in these kinds of games is always a bit weird, is that you are a tamer, this world's equivalent of a Pokemon trainer. The story starts with you coming to be whatever age you are allowed to be before you can become a tamer, and thus your story begins. You get the same unfair favoritism from a TemTem professor that all Pokemon protagonists get. Then bing bang bosh, you get sent on your journey to do a mundane task that will bring you in the general direction of a professional TemTem tamer scene. And apparently I didn't believe in tongue twisters when I wrote this script. You complete your first route, as expected of you, and then you meet the first dojo leader, this game's version of gyms. She gives you more attention than you probably deserve, and she's probably given anybody else in the world, and she tells you to meet her at a dojo in the next town. You travel to the next town, hopefully catching a few TemTems on the way, only to find that she's not there, and you have to go and find her. And if you can't tell by my tone, this happens in all the Pokemon games, so I'm not surprised it happens here. You're then introduced to the villains, who you should hopefully beat, but probably won't first time. Then you get to go and fight her in her dojo, and you'll probably lose 20 times. Then you get sent in the general direction of stronger TemTems and stronger trainers, and the process just goes on forever. I don't know what else to say. This is a Pokemon game, it doesn't matter what label they put on it. The story's going to be roughly the same every time. Now on to the actual gameplay. Starting with of course the centre of the universe, that of the monsters or TemTem or whatever they're called. The starters are adorable. The edgy nerd within me went with the purple psychic monkey Huchit, which, spoiler alert, is hands down the coolest out of all the starters. Then there's Crystal, which while sounding like a Lady of the Night somehow manages to be even more predictable and ends up being a crystal tortoise. And the last of the starters is Smazy, whose name immediately makes me think of the psychic dream cloud from Pokemon Black and White, but is actually, of course, a fighting monkey, because it has to be, because it's a Pokemon game, and of course a starter has to somehow be a fighting monkey. These TemTem plus whatever weird monstrosity your rival is using are amongst the first TemTem you see. The issue with this is that these are some of the coolest in the whole game. Looking through TemTem's equivalent of Bulbapedia, as honestly after completing the first island I feel like I've only seen like 10 monsters. I can safely say I can count the TemTem I genuinely think, look or sound cool on 2 hands. The types are also a little funky. They have the basic elements of water, fire and nature with then electric, rock and poison. Chuck in wind, neutral, fighting and psychic and you have, relatively speaking, the basics of the normal Pokemon game. Then there's the weird types, starting with digital, which you can't obtain and only your rival and some weird professor have access to. Essentially they serve as some kind of weird middle ground between Porygon and Mewtwo from Pokemon, being that they're artificially made and really powerful. The other weird one is Crystal, but not in fact they have gimmicks like digital. As far as I can tell, Crystal types seem pretty standard. Rather, I just don't understand what they're trying to represent. With Pokemon types, they are relatable and self-explanatory. Fairy being the weirdest, but you just know that to be magical. Ghost being spooky, Dark being edgy. You can just accept them at face value. Crystal, on the other hand, I just don't get, and probably never will. Mainly because I don't understand what makes it any different from the rock type. The final issue I have with the TemTems, or whatever they're called, is the evolution system, which just feels to intentionally screw over the player. You don't evolve at certain levels, but rather after a certain number of levels have passed while it's been in your possession. Now, to be fair, this has ended the whole just waiting until you encounter a creature later on, so you don't have to grind levels for as long that Pokemon had. But, in turn, it creates both lore and general fairness issues. First and foremost, you can catch a higher level version of monsters later on in the story, but to some extent you are screwed over by doing this. It would make more sense in-game to just get a lower level TemTem. Have him start in battle against a much stronger enemy and switch him out, giving him a bunch of easy XP, almost instantly evolving him so he fen levels with much higher base stats. Of course you then have to grind levels, but it would be easier to bring a level up to the same level as the rest of your party than it will be to get a monster at your party's level, then level it up, let's say 17 times higher than your current party's level, especially when you consider you do run out of higher level content at some point. Then lore-wise, it creates this issue that the monsters are unable to grow without being tamed. These creatures have to be tied to a master, it has to be enslaved, and it has to be used in pet fighting tournaments if it is to grow and evolve at some point. But then this isn't the case, as you can catch evolved forms of some but not all TemTem. Which then brings the question of why you can have an evolved and unevolved TemTem at the same level naturally, or even worse, the unevolved one being stronger if they are growing and gaining levels in the same place. Is one's experience more valuable? Or behind the scenes is there some kind of genetic bias allowing some to evolve and others not? I mean, this is just weird, and it's more of a personal issue because I just want my TemTem to evolve and it just isn't happening. Nothing I have has evolved yet in-game, and I've leveled them all up by at least 10 but closer to 15 times each. The system just is not rewarding, or at least not rewarding enough to justify such a large grind. However, as University apparently dictates, I need to include some positives, and there are some things I like about the TemTem. The synergy moves are a nice touch mechanically. Getting a bonus because the other TemTem is a certain type is cool, although once again lore-wise it feels a bit stupid. Why would a move get a passive buff purely because a friendly TemTem is of a certain type, and if it's presence based, why don't you get the buff from the opponent's monsters? But once again I turn that into a negative, so let's move on. The permanent duo battles are amazing. Perhaps it's the feeling of not getting enough of them in Pokemon, but I love having the game duo based. Although once again this could just be personal taste, as honestly it is just a gimmick that does little mechanically with the exception of the rather rare moves I just mentioned. Now, to go off on a tangent, the whole philosophy of this game was essentially a harder core Pokemon game, with a much bigger focus on the whole IVs, in this game called SVs or single values, and EVs, now called TVs or training values in this game. All of which was admittedly an aspect of Pokemon I completely ignored, as I've yet to get invited to any Pixelmon streamer events. God, crikey, I'm waiting. Sorry, got something stuck in my throat. The issue with this is that this game's grind is so tedious and unrewarding that it doesn't support this less casual style of gameplay. Ignoring how long it takes to level up, the limited choice of monsters, especially early on, makes it incredibly difficult to get the correct TVs for the starting, let's say, half of the game, meaning your team is suboptimal until you can afford to go back and start all over again with the trainers that don't reset, and because of the duo system, you need a sacrificial training TemTem to fight alongside the one you're actually training up. To make matters worse, this hardcore style, a term I have been trying to avoid, is such an underlying philosophy of the game for key trainers such as villains and the dojo leaders and masters have seemingly been trained to TV perfection or have near perfect SVs. Either that or their levels are just for show. Which brings us neatly on to the next point. This game is hard, or at least it was for someone who was approaching it relatively casually. I found myself struggling massively with the dojo leader especially, but I also lost to the villain boss who challenges you directly after a forced encounter with two of her still rather strong henchmen. The issue I have here, beyond losing, is that I was the same if not higher level than every trainer I was fighting, and using TemTems that I had leveled up myself for at least 10 levels beforehand. I make that last point specifically because, generally speaking, monsters you have trained up will be stronger than the same monsters found at similar levels in the wild, because of the previous mentioned TVs. An acronym I have only just realised was an incredibly poor choice by the developers. Part of the reason you get more XP from fighting trainers or tamers or whatever they're called in this game is that they will have some bonus stats to represent them having trained their monsters and earning TVs. However, in this game they seem to have taken this slightly further and seem to have given these tamers TemTems near perfect TVs. Ignoring the fact this makes it very difficult to approach the game in a casual manner, there's also the issue that the first island has a severe lack of monsters to choose from, with some types not even being accessible, and thus some training values are not available to your team, specifically whatever water, psychic, rock and fire type gives you. Anyway, this has been a quite Debbie Downer tangent here, so let's return to some positives. I like the aesthetic. The almost Habbo Hotel design of characters made me chuckle, and I like the customization, although even that has been tainted, but I'll get to that later. The world is similarly beautiful, especially the water, looks amazing, and the world designs such as the big natural fortress near the end of the first island and the interiors of dojos are stunning, awe-inspiring even. Similarly, they have put a lot of effort into making areas worth returning to. From the get-go you can see areas you can climb and surf that you want to access but you can't. The way they have made them so obvious makes me think I probably will not forget them when I finally get what I need to access them. I did mention I had a gripe with the customization, and that is how blimming expensive it is. The first clothing store you access has stuff going for I believe at the lowest 3,000 TemTem bucks, but the highest was like 14,000. I got 48 bucks from beating 2 enemy tamers and then lost 258 from losing to the villain. The currency has thus far been rather poor. I believe beating every tamer on the first island will net you at best 2,000. But that is presuming you don't buy anything. Of course, you'll probably buy the cards needed to capture monsters and healing items if you are more intelligent than I was, deciding you should be able to beat the game without them, as so far no tamers have used items against me. I strongly suspect the game will end up with microtransactions, and no, this isn't a hit at how slow the development has felt in the time I've been watching this game. No, I feel people stress they are willing to pay because customization is something that has been widely accepted as an acceptable thing to pay real money for. I feel the only reason why the game doesn't already have microtransactions is because they have branded themselves as this anti-Nintendo that listens to the hardcore Pokemon fans, and thus are too scared to bring them in. I am painfully aware this has gone on far longer than I had planned, so I shall be quick on these last few goodish points. The soundtrack is enjoyable in-game, but out-of-game has much to be desired. It is also incredibly limited, as far as I can tell, having a villain theme, a trainer battle theme, a house theme, and 7 variations of the wild battle music, that after listening to 2 of these, and deciding I couldn't really tell the difference, had given up on checking the others. So throughout this video, I will have had only the wild battle music, and if you felt any noticeable difference, let me know in the comments. And before I get any further into the typical self-shilling I should probably do at the beginning of the video, we need to give this game a totally legitimate numerical score. I give this game a child you tried your best sticker over the fact it's early access and thus it's an industry standard they get a free pass to do what they want. To be fair, what they want is a good alternative to Pokemon, and also to be fair, I feel they have done a hell of a lot of a better job than Digimon. However, I would not feel comfortable recommending this game at this price. I for one know I am not getting as much enjoyment out of it as I felt I should, especially considering I love Pokemon and should in turn love this. Emphasising this issue, they have bluntly stated that the game will increase in price as development goes on to, quote, give advantages to supporters. So if you love Pokemon and have grown to find it too easy and know you are going to have to try this game eventually, perhaps now is the time to get it because it will be cheaper than whatever it will be in the future. And with that, another TWIT is done and dusted. Hope you've enjoyed what has ended up being another quite scathing TWIT. I promised anybody who joined me over the Fall Guys hype that I felt it was rather rare for me to give a negative opinion on games I actually play enough to do a TWIT, so this negativity should not become the norm, at least I hope. Once again, feedback in like or comment form would be greatly appreciated, as would a subscription so you can watch these videos grow over time. I would also like to bring attention to the Twitch and Twitter links on screen now and in the description below. Twitch is my pride and joy, and I would love more members in my close-knit community, and Twitter is where I vent or share smut, depending on my mood. With all that, I bid you a hearty cheerio and hope to see you again soon.